Okay, I have a little note on my screen that says we are streaming live on Facebook. So, good evening and welcome to the Pat Conroy Literary Center Open Mic Night. I'm your host this evening, Melissa Whiteford St. Clair, and I bring greetings from the Pat Conroy Literary Center Executive Director, Jonathan Hout. And welcome to tonight's readers, and a special welcome to our featured writer, Jessica Goody. Yay! So, Pat Conroy Literary Center open mic nights are held virtually on even months from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern, with in-person open mic nights on the odd months taking place at the Pat Conroy Literary Center. Our monthly open mic night is presented in partnership with the South Carolina Writers Association and live streamed on the Conroy Center's Facebook page. As I mentioned, tonight our featured writer for August is poet Jessica Goody, author of Phoenix, Transformation Poems. September's open mic is in person at the center and features Deirdre Gar Johns on September the 12th. So our open mics feature short readings of like 3 to 5 minutes by each writer in many genres. And tonight we have a great lineup of readers. So again, welcome everyone, and let's get started. So we'll do a round robin of readers, and then I'll introduce and turn the mic over to Jessica Goody. Hey, Estelle, I
Hello.
see that you have joined us, and I actually had you first in the queue.
Oh
Are
my
you
gosh.
comfortable to start? And then in the queue next would be Abigail Summers.
Hi, Abigail. That's great. Okay, I can do that.
Okay,
Think. Give me just a
okay,
moment to compose
okay,
me. I just got on. I just found the link.
okay.
Um,
Good, good. I'm glad you're here.
Lots of communications in the Pat Conroy Center. Okay. We had a good day at the center today. I was a docent, and we had
Oh, awesome.
visitors from California and various places, Canada. All want to see where Pat Conroy wrote or where he was located. Okay, let me put together two pieces of information.
Okay. That's great that you had so many visitors today despite the
Well,
weather. So
they
that's
weren't
good
a
news.
large number. They're just always fascinating, the people
Good.
there. Yeah.
If you need a couple more
Okay.
minutes, I
No,
can.
I'll go.
Okay. All right.
I'm
Awesome. Thank you.
responding to a query that was put out about the analog way of doing jobs in the old days. And it's something I got to thinking about. And I thought, well, I could probably talk about my analog job, gathering the news without a laptop or a cell phone or any desktop computer at all. I had a minor role in covering Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as a reporter in the late 1960s in the Atlanta Bureau of United Press International, a service used by the major newspapers all over the world, as well as by the major 3 national radio and television networks. We did it all without a personal computer, mainframe computer, or a cell phone. That phone in the newsroom and clacking news wires spitting out copy were our sources of news. The newsroom was a large open room in a 2-floor office building cantilevered over the Interstate 85, built through the middle of downtown Atlanta. A young reporter like me would come to their shift, immediately check the story file, a clipboard of news stories we were following. I was doing this for Atlanta and Georgia stories, and reporters in 1 or 2 man or woman bureaus throughout the Southeast in cities like Columbia and Chattanooga and Jackson, Mississippi would do the same. Then I would check with the Southeast news editor on Georgia news that might be developing. He sat across from me at a long line of desks and teletype machines that stretched across the room. A teletype machine with a unionized teletype operator was to my right, as I was generating headlines for radio and television station news programs every hour, so those outlets would have Georgia news at the top of the hour. Separate national and international news was arriving by teletype from New York to these same wire printers in their offices. Jack Warner was my news editor, and I'd heard him I'd hear him getting onto stories he needed to help with, like hijacking of U.S. airliners to Cuba, a frequent occurrence during this time. It followed the Cold War brinksmanship of Russia installing missiles on Cuba in a clear threat to the U.S. mainland. Jack also was the on-the-ground expert for every space launch from Cape Canaveral. Dr. King was part of our beat, and he was everywhere in the South. I had heard him speak at the University of Notre Dame when I was in college at St. Mary's across the street, and I'd marched with him in Chicago. But at UPI, stories most often came into the Atlanta Bureau through a dedicated civil rights reporter who called the stories into us from marches or appearances. Frequently, I was taking dictation as the reporter read me his story. I remember asking in the office about King's whereabouts once, and reporters told me he was on retreat at an island in South Carolina at the Penn Center. I would later learn its actual location and its nearness to Beaufort, home of Paris Island. So those were some of my first awarenesses of the area I now live in. When the garbage strikes in Memphis continued to their fatal end, we had reporters from the Bureau there reporting. It is unethical to put a signer or a byline on a story unless a reporter is actually on site. King's funeral was a major news event. New York-based UPI reporters flew down to cover most of it, and my job was to follow news and the police radio during the preliminaries, as well as the funeral. I observed a quiet city, which was very unusual because there were riots breaking out in major cities all over the country. DC, Chicago, and Detroit were burning. The funeral services stretched from one side of town to the other, and the farm wagon carrying King's body was accompanied by thousands, major civil rights leaders, many national officials, including Robert Kennedy, Harry Belafonte, Joan Baez, and Hollywood elites. It was a national and international mourning that shook the nation. After his death, I reported from press conferences with his widow, Coretta, and SCLC leaders and covered the anniversary of his death and the growth of Coretta's and SCLC's building of the Martin Luther King Center. Many of the functions of news gathering today are the same, always having verification for stories, taking your information from reliable sources, speaking with the parties involved, getting actual quotes, direct quotes, coordinating with photographers. But the difference is we were doing this without computers and without the 24-hour news program started by Ted Turner in Atlanta and later growing to the 24-hour service of CNN News. And we were doing it without multiple channels of cable TV and other streaming sources. I remember going through the newsroom of CNN and seeing a typical newsroom with the people like me, the reporters at their desks, the news editors, the regional editors, the specialist editors. But there was something I had never seen. 7 graphic artists, all doing work, crazy, busy, getting the pictures online. The use of pictures in the media were completely different from the way it was in that time. On my side of the office, we were called news side, and then there was a picture side. And the people on the picture side had those big cameras, maybe a Leica or two, taking pictures at the site. But it was hardly how it is today.
That was so interesting and informative. Oh my goodness. I loved hearing that. So I'm glad you chose to write about analog.
You've had such
Sorry?
an interesting life, Estelle.
Pardon
Done
me?
so many. You've had such an interesting life. You've done so many amazing things and always so
Right time,
generous
right
too with
place.
your time.
It's amazing how Vietnam probably figured into a lot of this. Of course, Vietnam was going on I was there when we had a four-beller, which was stop the presses, here's your headline for tomorrow. And it was Lyndon Johnson announcing that he would not accept a draft to run again. He would not accept the nomination of the Democratic Party in 1968.
Wow.
That was a
So interesting.
real shocker around the world. But anyway, that was coming
Wow.
across the spitting machine behind me.
Mm. Thank you, Estelle. I have Abigail next, and Laura, you are in the queue. So Abigail, the mic is yours.
That was great, Estelle. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for sharing that. I really enjoyed it. Good evening, everybody. I'm a Low Country author of short stories, poetry, and novels. You can find my novels on Amazon.com. The titles are Life of the Bird Out the Window, Forgiving the Past, and The Untold Legacy. Tonight, I'm going to read two poems. The first one you can find on my blog. The title is The Child Within. It was in the moonlight that I saw him, a man younger than my father, sent on laughter brought by the side of the train. He stood at attention, waving his blue and white cap, the schoolboy inside, leaping out, holding on to another time. With a fierce stride, he ran beside the engine as it rumbled. Black smoke filled the evening sky. Brakes sparked as it changed tracks over the murky river. His face mirrored in the silver metal as it wheeled by. An endless joy radiated from the glare of the railway light. As the caboose turned the corner, the man's smile faded into reality. He sunk with displeasure onto the rocks beneath the sole of his shoes. Minutes later, he headed across the oiled tracks, underneath a gray fog, and disappeared over the hilltop. The child within was a working man, saddled to responsibility, but tomorrow he'd return, as the whistle blew and the still clanged a midnight song.
Great.
And my second poem is actually featured on spillwords.com this week. The title is Unanswered Dream. Thank you. I wanted to follow, but the moon would not let me. Each step was dark and lost, guided by mirages of what I thought I saw. Though I did not see you, I knew you were near. Your words could not be silenced, even from a distance. They spoke to me in that pensive way that I could not get rid of. Though there were days that I wished I was not called to the forest. There were days where I wished the land was clear and easy to see. But this path was muddled, footprints too big, and the sadness clung to me with each one saying, turn back. The branches swayed, the wind more forceful than before. I stood there, wanted to move. But the overgrown weeds clawed at my feet, pulled me in many directions. Each one I cut grew back stronger. Impossible, I thought. So I stood there for a long time at the edge of what could be. So close, but not close enough. I knew the woods would always be there, calling into the night when I least expected it. But I chained myself to reality so that the ache would not grow. Okay. Thank you.
Awesome, as always, Abigail. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Laura, I have you at the mic next with Elizabeth in the queue. So, Laura, if you are ready, the mic is yours.
Okay. This is the opening to a new novel that I'm working on called Tea Leaves and Treachery. It is chapter 1, and I apologize for any doggy accompaniment during this. So
Laura, could I ask the name again?
Tea
the name
Leaves
of-
and Tea Leaves and Treachery.
Tea leaves.
Tilly shielded her eyes against the sun when she stepped out of her small home on Muddy Creek Lane. She hated the name of her street. Okay, hate might be too strong of a sentiment, but she really didn't like it. It had no romantic flair, no ambiance, no coziness, no spookiness. The name flopped without grace when it rolled off the tongue, and the name alone should have been enough to have kept her from purchasing the cottage. But she'd been smitten the moment she stepped inside 5 years ago and found herself wrapped in its warmth. She'd known she was home within the square footage of this quaint space, which included a resident ghost, a temperamental, middle-aged woman with a nosy attitude. So she became Tilly of Muddy Creek Lane. She scrambled down the sidewalk late again, sandals slapping the pavement at a furious pace, ignoring everything behind her. No time for that nonsense, because even the empty streets were crowded when you could communicate with the dead, and it was too early to face the small group of ghosts or spirits or whatever behind her, too soon to deal with whatever they might tell her. Plus, she wasn't in the mood for it today. This happened every year the closer it got to Samhain, or what the normal people called Halloween, when the veil between the living and the dead thinned. The wind lifted her dark brown hair and whispered incomprehensible sounds in her ear. It had kept her up all night, never revealing its specific message until, frustrated and exhausted, she'd slammed the window shut and locked it in the wee hours of the night. But it had found her as soon as she stepped outside this morning. The whole day burst with possibility, but not the good kind. Sometimes being a witch sucked. Humidity clung to the air, heavy with hidden secrets, and her dress stuck to her back. She pulled it away from her skin. God, it was hot. Sometimes she wanted to leave Shadowbrook, a small coastal town in South Carolina, escape the heat, humidity, and dark history of the area. But something always changed her mind. Sometimes something as simple as a cooler day after weeks of oppressive heat, or a day at the beach, could change the course of her ruminations, and this place needed her to keep the darkness at bay. At 10, already 2 hours late for work, she pushed open the door of Tea and Tidings, the jingle of a 200-year-old bell announcing her arrival. "Sorry I'm late," she said. She weaved through the small display cases and made her way behind the back counter, where she dumped her purse and a bag of books into a cabinet. Willow, her friend and business partner, sat at a corner table in a wrinkled blouse and a bright pair of orange leggings, her blonde hair pulled into a ponytail. They'd opened the shop 3 years ago. It had started as a simple tea shop, a place for them to practice their recipes, both for enjoyment and more magical purposes. They'd even dabbled in making tinctures and medicinal teas to serve the special health needs of their community. Simple folk remedies like a balm to soothe an itchy bug bite, or a tea that promised happy dreams. But it had quickly turned into more. Divination and fortune-telling services had grown fast and now made up a good 50% of their business. A small town like Shadowbrook seemed an unlikely place for such things to be tolerated, but the community, even the dedicated churchgoers, seemed to think it was all good fun, which was true most of the time.
Amazing. I'm ready for more. Who else? Right?
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Elizabeth, I
Thank
have you at the mic, and then I'll go, and then we'll introduce Jessica formally.
Okay, thank you. I am very happy to be here tonight. I have 2 short poems to read. The first one I selected as a bit of an homage to Jessica's work. You may or may not know, she is stop number 1 on the Hilton Head Poetry Trail. She sits at the gateway to Coligny Beach, which is where a slew of tourists go by every day. And one reason that particular poem is there is so much of her work is set in nature, and she offers exquisite detail in her work to bring nature alive, which I've always really appreciated. And this particular poem, I've been doing a series of poems in the last couple of years. I'm approaching 70 this month, and so I've been thinking a lot about the nature of aging, and in particular women in our culture aging. sometimes gracefully, sometimes not so much.
Mhm.
Uh, so this is a piece I wrote about that. A lesson in sea glass. Tumbled in sea, salt, sand, random rubbish, recycles. Smoothed and pitted bits, transform Noxema jars and sky, vodka, beer bottles, dead crystal, French wines, into shore search and discovery, gleaning the beach for the ocean's spilled out trophies. Blue, slightly unique, well worn, hard to find, and easy to treasure. Everyday whites and greens and browns, rare vestige of print or rim or logo, prized. Proof some things, spent, old, and odd shaped, attract the discerning collector. Thank you. This next is a bit of a show and tell. I think you can see this. This is in a new anthology that just came out of ekphrastic poems based on a Columbia artist's collage work. It's called Tall Women, because that was the name of her, what do you call an art show? Her art show. It's a bunch of like 5 foot by 24-inch collages of tall women. And I was recruited to write one about this particular woman. Can you see her?
Hmm.
They're all really interesting. Her name is Seng, S-E-N-G. And this is what I wrote about her. A twice exceptional fate. Once, I met a man who changed my face, cut out almond shapes, pasted on blue-gray eyes, twisted my face into infinite questions, my mouth to kissless lemon pucker, nose sniffing some sassy skunk hour. Then covered my hair, first a round wisp of lace that coiled rings in circle, a crown. The keffiyeh hides every curl. When he dressed me in robes, neck to ankle to wrist of loose black folds, I disappeared. I put on big shoes and outgrew this man. Taller and taller I rose, kept covered, added a fuchsia underdress to remind me I am Seng, I become.
Hmm.
Yeah, this is available on Amazon. It's 21 South Carolina female poets. Yeah, it's really cool little collection.
That is so cool. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Okay, I guess it's me. So this poem is relatively new and it is styled after Willie Perdomo's That's My Heart Right There. So if along the way you feel like chiming in, you're welcome to. So it is called Down on the Farm. We used to say, down on the farm, this land passed down, who paid? Down on the farm. Work 24/7 to sustain a family and eke a living this way, down on the farm. Plowing and planting corn and clover, then baling hay, down on the farm. Calves in the meadow and kittens in the barn at play, down on the farm. A family style fried chicken dinner at noonday, down on the farm. Hearing mutt dogs bark and bay, down on the farm. Butchering cows, pigs, and chickens mainstay, down on the farm. Watching a beloved grandmother crochet, down on the farm. Roast beef supper round the table ends the workday, down on the farm. That is Down on the Farm. So it is my pleasure to introduce Jessica Goody and share her bio. Jessica Goody is the award-winning author of Defense Mechanisms, Phosphine Publishing 2016, and Phoenix Transformation Poems, CW Books 2019. Her writing has appeared in over 100 publications, including the Wallace Stevens Journal, Reader's Digest, Phantom Drift, The High Window, Bird's Thumb, The Centrifugal Eye, Really System, Along Southern Roads, Event Horizon, The Dime Show Review, Chicken Soup for the Soul, The Seventh Wave, Third Wednesday, The MacGuffin, Harbinger Asylum, and The Main Review. Defense Mechanisms was chosen as a power read by Hilton Head Monthly, a book of the month by the Creativity Webzine, and received an honorable mention for the 2020 North Street Book Prize. Jessica facilitated poetry slams and taught writing courses for the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at USCB. She contributed poetry to the stage productions Womanhood and A Voyage of Poetic Discovery for the Sun City Community Theater, and Coronavox, Stories from the Front for the Family Theater Company. A freelance journalist, she has been a contributing writer for Hilton Head Monthly, the Bluffton Sun, Sensations, Local Life, and Bluffton Today. Jessica is the winner of the 2016 Magnets and Ladders Poetry Prize. Her poem Beachcombing was recently added to the Hilton Head Poetry Trail. Phoenix Transformation Poems is a rich triumph and marks its author once again as an artist whose work should be followed closely and by those interested in the forces shaping the future of American poetry. That is a statement by Harvey Traub, author of September 19. This is a strong poetic work. Bill Newby, author of Passing Through. Jessica Goody excels in description, pulling in readers with her use of words to capture the senses. Harvey Lau, book dilettante. Welcome, Jessica. We look forward to you reading and sharing, and anything I missed in the bio that you'd like to share, please do. The mic is yours.
Thank you. Well, as you and Robin both said, my poem I'm going to start with was recently added to the Hilton Head Poetry Trail, and it accompanies a wonderful sculpture by Mark Larkin called Sandy Roads. It's called Beachcombing. The water is bitter and refreshing. Its white froth flashes and flows about damp ankles like swirling dancers' skirts. Shells bedded in glittering silt are washed awake by a breaking wave. A cold handful, like unearthing Aztec ruins. A clod of coral, rough and fascinating against sensitive fingertips. Beach glass like shards of broken pottery. Cockles, cones, olive shells, cold and porcelain smooth in the hand. The architecture of turrets and tunnels, spiral stairs and crenellations, Gothic spires boring into the sky, specimens stippled or streaked with sunrise, freckled as freshly caught trout, their undersides stained with the violet of dawn and dusk, strewn among tangled tumbleweeds of algae. Satisfied, the beachcomber trudges, stumbling back up the dunes, bearing a pocketful of marble cool seashells, weeping sand. This piece is called Odyssey, and it's going to be included in the upcoming anthology for the Island Writers Network. Hatchlings emerge from fragile eggshells, cracked shards like broken china embedded in the sand. The beach is strewn with kelp that glows like radium, a lighted path to the sea. Twitching forward like clockwork toys, they move blindly towards its rhythmic breath, fresh and bitter with seaweed and salt. They struggle from shell to water, strain towards life, towards freedom. Narrow tracks dot the damp shore, an exodus of tiny Bedouins crossing the desert. As you can see, I've always been drawn to the ocean, and much of my poetry is inspired by nature, especially the sea, which is why this poem is called Whale Song. The surfacing pod glides past with a soft splash, elegant zeppelin bodies gleaming. Photo negatives in black and white, they click and moan in a damp dialect like a whistling wind. The crone is trailed by calves swimming in the white froth of her wake. Her dorsal fin is a pirate flag cutting through the hematite gray sea. The pod streaks through the icy waves in tight formation, a marching army exhaling clouds of spray. We cannot know what they are thinking, only gaze at the orcas passing slowly between glinting towers of ice and hope that the sight will never fade from our memory. This one is called Summer Fruit. Textures and similes abound as we select summer fruit, squeezing the red hefts of pomegranates, solid and round, sweet golden moons of peaches, and the pocked red hearts of strawberries. Lemons like handfuls of sunshine, and pale crescents of banana, their yellow skins like speckled snakes. Oranges resemble miniature suns, bright paper lanterns strung for a garden party. Sunset orbs of nectarines mingle in the bowl, waiting to be consumed. The sweetness of their scent is heady, rich, syrupy juice dripping summery stickiness. Bruise-colored plums and grapefruit with hearts of rosy pulp. The great boulder of the watermelon awaits its execution, its green beetle shell striped like malachite. Cleaved open, it will reveal its flamboyant core, a geode darkly studded with seeds, to be devoured by tongues streaked violet by freshly picked blueberries, fingers blood-stained with juice. This next one is called Ancient Trees, and it will also be in the Island Writers Network anthology. The trees have grown old together, a coven of seers and sages. Gray moss drips from the bones of their brittle branches. Knobbed and spotted with age, they toss their tangled hag's hair with reckless dash against the breeze. Ancient trees whisper secrets with every hiss of wind. We cannot hear their verdant voices, only feel their truths straining to be told. They remain, endure, abide, ageless observers of humanity's endless cruelty. Generations of soldiers poised on a hill, brass buttons shining and muskets firing, leaving silent witnesses scarred by shrapnel. The trees saw the elegant ships sails taut and gleaming like silk shirt fronts, bearing the cringing cargo of slaves. Storm-torn and stripped by wind, ancient trees bear their bark with pride, their broken limbs now ragged and arthritic by the scar-deep fissures of time. My next poem is another ode to the Low Country called Green Mysteries. The green mysteries of the marshes are cloaked in cobwebs of sprawling Spanish moss, resembling the wind-blown beards of pirates and patriarchs. Invisible birds testify, hidden among the boughs. The marshes spread through sandbars like maps modeled with the damp stucco of oyster beds, dark as spent coffee grounds. The broken mirror gleam of low tide reflects the sky, bleeding silver into blue. Garlands flutter like handkerchiefs in the breeze, blending and blurring in infinite shades of green. And this one is about the same trees. I was inspired to write it coming home one night. I came to South Carolina from the suburbs of Long Island, so moving to a place without streetlights was kind of an adjustment. The world is black. There is no sky, no marsh, no trees, no clouds visible. Darkness total and blinding. The road is a blank stream. I could fall into the forest, drown among the bracken. Alligators lie at pond bottom, plotting. I have to squint and stare to discern the shaggy cypresses, the feathery pines, the scurrying foxes and elegant, nervous deer are nowhere to be found. No rodents rush along the road to be momentarily illuminated by my headlights. The silence is unsettling. Utter darkness, lacking the landscape's shadowy, arresting chiaroscuro. I have to search to see the stars. A great book can transport you to other places, which is what inspired my next poem. After reading Out of Africa, I wanted to thank Isak Dinesen for giving me a glimpse of Kenya. This piece is called Ode to Isak Dinesen. Surrounded by lush greenery, the house seems made of trees. Ivy shrouds the weather-worn walls and strains upwards, winding around moss-furred pillars. Heliotrope swells over the eaves, shrouding the windows in a vivid purple glow. Branches drip with vines thick as pythons, green fronds curling. Palms spread like parasols beneath the sun-bleached sky. A spear stands poised in warning. Elegant screens linger in corners. Leaf shadows play on the jade lawn, a path leading to wind-blown trees. Tousled hair fluttering like green scarves. Mountains roll along the horizon. Coffee-colored hills blurred like breaking waves. Giraffes gallop against the endless landscape, avoiding the stealthy streaks of stalking lions.
Thank you, Jessica. Did you have more or was that the final? Now you're on mute somehow.
Sorry,
That's
just
okay.
taking a drink.
Okay, just checking. Keep going.
This poem is called Potatoes. Potatoes tumble from burlap sacks like speckled stones, damp and cool in my hand, weighed in the paleness of my palm. The peeler scrapes away the epidermis of coarse brown paper, deftly separating the rhinoceros hide roughness from the pale prize within. The peel falls away like curling ribbon, exposing yellow flesh and thumbprints. A handful of gold, like ore shaken from a miner's pan. The wet grass scent of freshly shaven potatoes, skins strewn like gift wrap on Christmas morning. I love swing music and crossword puzzles, both of which inspired this poem, Words and Music. Rain drums the window panes like percussion as the storm crescendos, the glass streaming. Such a day calls for jazz. Ella's tongue-twisting scat reminds me of the precision of language, experiments with sound, rhythm, and syllables. I tap my pencil in time to her crooning strain, pondering Lionel Hampton's instrument. 10 letters, starts with V. My pencil stutters against the tabletop, keeping time as I count the spaces, testing each letter to see whether the potential combination makes a word. With each completed clue, another cross street appears on the grid. The black and white squares, stark as sheet music. The last note hangs in the air. The last blank space waits to be filled. A single vowel making the difference between gibberish and a genuine word. I tend to think in images, and a lot of my poetry is inspired by artwork. This poem, Stockings, was inspired by the photographer Dorothea Lange's 1934 portrait, Stenographer with Mended Stockings. And this poem was awarded second place in the Reader's Digest Poetry Contest. The delicate cobwebbed stockings are scarred with stitches. Fresh tears like flesh wounds gape at kneecap and heel from a day of pounding pavement, waiting in soup kitchen queues. They are soaked in the tin wash tub, rinsed of the day's grime of sweat and silt, and hung to dry, fluttering on the clothesline or draped over a chair. The fading luxury of silk, her last pair. Every night, she attempts to repair the damage, to weave them into wearability. Runs are scratched into silk, where they will spread like the routes and rivers on a cartographer's map. She bathes her blistered, calloused feet. Her bare legs are smudged and soiled, her toenails the color of stone, her skin cracked and leathery as old shoes. In the morning, she crosses legs sheathed with spider webs, arranging her skirt to hide the latest darning. I wrote this piece, Ode to Maya, in honor of my beloved poodle. You sit at the top of the stairs, willing us home. When the door bursts open, you spin in delight It's worth leaving just to receive your ecstatic homecoming. You meet us at the door, dancing around our feet, unwilling to wait for us to take off our coats or set down the groceries before you anoint us with kisses. The sunlight stripes the rug where you lay surrounded by people, emitting a shuddering sigh of pure contentment. Riding in the car, you are Amelia Earhart, taking flight, a daring aviatrix. Your tongue lolls from your grin, ears blown back from the open window. My final poem is called Certain Doorways. When I lived in New York, I used to walk around my neighborhood photographing trees in different seasons. I would pass by houses and wonder about the many lives of the people inside. Behind each wooden portal, between brass digits and flower pots, lives occur. Auras of lamplight illuminate domestic scenes, like something in a play. Every house is a box filled with heartbeats, footsteps, history, a potpourri of voices. The old trees lining the street bear witness to their gossip, their comings and goings. As I pass, I consider the geometry of every door. Narrow window panes, light glowing through stained glass, the mouth flap of the mail slot, the gleam of knob and hinge, the relationships that shift with every entrance and exit. It is human nature, when one encounters a box, an eagerness to look inside and discover its secrets. The most basic desire is the one to open the door, to step inside, secure in the knowledge of arriving home.
Thank you, Jessica, for sharing your beautiful words. Does
I'm so
anyone
glad
have
to
any?
be here.
Go ahead. Does anyone have any comments or questions?
I'd like to know when the island anthology is kind of.
I don't know yet. It's still being edited.
Still being edited. Okay, so it'll be called.
We're
Island Writers
looking for
Anthology.
a November launch.
November. Okay,
It's
great.
going to be called Sea Change.
Sea change.
Very good.
I'll make a note to look for it.
Jessica, are you actively writing right now, or?
I'm always working on something. I think I'm actually a better editor than I am a writer, so I tend to rework my own work very often. So I have 3 or 4 or more versions of everything I've ever written.
Kind of like trimming hedges sometimes, right?
So how do
Probably
you
easier.
know when you're done? When to stop editing?
I guess like a hedge when you cut off too much.
Yeah.
Sometimes you reread it and you realize what you've just done is a huge mistake, and then you put all the words back.
One of my writing partners told me, we can tinker with it forever. You can tinker with it. And at some point you have to just be okay and let it go out into the world and do as it may. But I found that same problem. You're like, maybe I should change this. And then you change it back. But I love your poems, Jessica.
Thank
They're
you.
just very tangible and like visible. You can touch them and taste them and feel them. They're just beautiful.
Thank you.
I love some of your expressions. Tiny Bedouins crossing the desert. That's great. That's terrific. And just that image of the damp stucco of oyster mounds. That was very picturesque. I look on oyster mounds a lot. I hadn't thought of stucco, but definitely you'll get stuck on them if you're not careful.
I've heard that actually. I mean, just opening an oyster is dangerous. So
Is. They have gloves and then they have special knives. And I think there's some rubber reinforcements too. So it's a careful game. But if they're well cooked, they should be open. You don't have to worry about the ones that are closed. You have enough that are open.
No, and Jessica, for me, the potato one is always so fun. Like making potatoes seem like a party with the ribbons and the curls and the peels.
Yeah.
that was one of the easier ones that I wrote. It was one of those rare times when you look at something and the poem just comes fully formed into your head and you write it down as fast as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Most of the time you're struggling line by line and word by word.
And well, thank you. Any closing questions or
I do have a question, and that
Okay.
was Stockings poem. And you said that won second prize with Reader's Digest. That's
Yes.
wonderful. Did you say there was a photograph of Dorothy Lang?
By Dorothea Lange. You've probably seen it. It's a woman's legs, a woman wearing high heels and torn stockings.
And torn stockings.
Yeah,
Is she
you
walking down
Google
the
it.
road? Is she walking down a street? Or-
I think she's sitting in a chair. It's just an image of her legs, but she
Yeah.
was a stenographer, so I think it was taken in an office. I don't
Yeah.
know. Unfortunately, from what I researched to write it, the stories of the people she photographed aren't that well documented. I guess she was trying to maintain their privacy, but you know, they're the kind of images you want to know more about.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I
I'll
used to
look it up.
use a series of her photographs in teaching the Depression era. She has a whole like Dust Bowl series and you know, all of the migrants who ended up in California. They're powerful photographs.
Well, I know
Right.
this
Yeah,
one
I don't know that one, but
this one was part of a series that she did in San Francisco. I don't know if they're technically it is a Depression era photo, but I don't know if it you know, counts as one of her migrant worker portraits. I don't know if that was considered a separate group of photos.
I'm
But-
sure it'd be, thank goodness there aren't many things you can't find on the internet. I was going to say on Google, but we're going to have to say something besides Google in the future days, I guess.
so
work-
true.
One of those artists who, you know, you can look at it over and over and always see something new.
Yeah.
mhm. I like that poem because we're in such a throwaway, everything is disposable society now. And in that era, even through the Second World War, which was my mother's era, you know, she used to talk about how you know, they would darn their stockings and often not wear stockings and put like a pen mark down.
Right.
That's back when they were, you know, because they were so expensive and so scarce for
Yes.
a lot of
I'm
that
sure
time.
most of the people who lived during the Depression would think we're ridiculous the way we
Mm.
waste things.
Oh, definitely, especially food.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Food and everything else. Goodness. Wow.
Wow. Well, thank you, Jessica. Any more questions or closing comments, Jessica?
Just that the poems that I read today were excerpts from my books, and if you enjoyed what you heard, I have copies available and I'm always happy to autograph them. So
Awesome.
thank you for inviting me, thank you for being here, and thank you for listening.
And you have a website,
Absolutely.
right? Okay.
Well, terrific. Thank you. And thank you, everyone that read, that showed up tonight, braved the weather, and we got through without any hiccups with the technology, with the weather. There are so many events coming up for the Pat Conroy Literary Center. So I invite everyone to please check the website, patconroyliterarycenter.org, And check the events tab on the Pat Conroy Literary Center Facebook page. I just want to share a couple of highlights. So remember, next month, September's open mic will be in person at the Pat Conroy Literary Center, and October's open mic will once again be virtual. If you would like to participate, email contact@patconroyliterarycenter.org to request adding your name to the reading roster. The 8th annual Low Country Book Club Convention is coming up September 27th and 28th. And the 9th annual Pat Conroy Literary Festival is November 1st and 2nd. And there are just a whole host of other events. So please, please check the sites and put them on your calendar. So thank you again, readers. This was a great evening spent with you, and have a great one.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks, everyone. I'm so glad you were
Thank
here.
you. Good to see you,
Yeah.
Jessica.
Good to see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.